Hi, my name is Will, and I'm a Christian pastor, and I want to talk to you today about Rubik's Cubes. I know some people have different reactions to Rubik's Cubes. For me, as a fan of the toy, I enjoy playing with them, so I see it as something that's fun that I like to have with me. But for some people, they see this as a thing of chaos. It looks like this in the store, but it doesn't stay like this very long. I remember when I brought my first cube home, and I held it for a little while, but then I started turning the sides and got it mixed up, and I had underestimated how difficult it would be to solve, how complex and chaotic this thing was, and pretty soon it looked mixed up. And the instructions that came with my dollar store cube weren't comprehensive enough to allow me to solve the cube. And so I'd had a thing of beauty for a little while, but instead of beauty, I had a thing of chaos. Now, if we want to look at the different permutations, the different possible combinations that a Rubik's Cube gives, it's really quite a large number. If you look at a cube, you can see it has 8 corner pieces, and those 8 corner pieces can all be twisted 3 different ways. And then we have 12 different edge pieces, and each of those can be twisted 2 different ways. So when we take all of those possible combinations and we multiply it out, we get a number that's so big it's beyond human comprehension. So to put it in perspective, scientists have done a rough estimate of how many grains of sand there are on the face of the earth, and they figure it's roughly around 5 quintillion. So that's a 5 with 18 zeros after it. That's a big number. Well, when you do the calculations to see how many arrangements of a Rubik's Cube you can have, it's about 43 quintillion, so almost 10 times as high. And just as an upper limit, scientists have done similar estimates of how many stars there are in the observable universe, and it's only slightly higher in an exponential scale, roughly 7 with 22 zeros after it. So a Rubik's Cube is a fun toy for children, but it is an entirely complex item. In the Bible, there's an explanation of the origins of the universe, and I don't believe that it's there as a way of laying out all of the scientific details of what happened. Instead, I like to focus on the narrative, the story of it. And the story of the origins of the universe are that God spoke into the nothingness and said, "Let there be light." The terminology some of us might remember from our Bibles is that the earth was formless and void. The Hebrew root there speaks more about chaos. The earth was chaotic. There was nothing there. There was only disorder there. But some people, when they look at a cube, they don't see the chaos. They see a challenge to be overcome. They see something that they can solve, that they can learn and study. When you see someone solve a Rubik's Cube in, say, under 10 seconds, which the world records are in that neighborhood, it sort of hides the fact that these people have had to do a lot of work, a lot of memorization, a lot of training, the muscle memory in their hands even, to solve a cube. So, for example, this cube here looks more or less solved, except for these 2 pieces. Now these are in the right places, they're just twisted the wrong way. But since I can see the way that they need to be turned, then I know the pattern or the algorithm to solve it. For this case, I turn the front 1 turn clockwise. I do the same thing with the bottom. And then I reverse that, and then repeat it again. And then I put this piece in the proper spot there. This time I do the bottom first, and then reverse it, and then repeat it twice, and then it's solved. There are patterns and algorithms that once they've been studied and memorized and applied, make this possible. Now, this is what a lot of people want to do with their own life. They want to see every problem as something that really only requires some careful thought and discovery of a pattern or an algorithm, and then apply that to everyday life. And the church is full of people like that, and religious history is full of those same people. The interesting thing, though, is when we look at scriptures, when we look at the Bible, the people who had done that with their faith, the people who saw God as a challenge to be studied and then solved, those people often found themselves on the outside, at least on the outside of who God was and what God was trying to do. The Bible is full of stories of prophets. These were people who came to Israel to bring them a message from God. But they were often on the outside of the political system, on the outside of the religious system, because they didn't fit the pattern of how they were supposed to act, of what they were supposed to say, what they were supposed to look like. In the middle of the Bible, one of the oldest stories in the Bible is a story of a man named Job. And Job has terrible things happen to him. And he's trying to figure out how this happened, why this happened, what could be done differently, what did it mean about God? And so he's asking these questions, and he's thinking this through, and he's angry and he's mad. And so what happened then is his friends come around him. And they listen to him complain for a little while, but pretty soon they step in with their answers. You see, these men believe that they have found the proper patterns and algorithms for the spiritual life. And when they see Job, their friend, the man who has suffered terrible things, when they see him stepping outside of their patterns and their algorithms, they challenge him. They chastise and criticize him for what he's done. The story continues, and Job refuses to accept their algorithms, their patterns, their solutions for what's happened in his life. He believes that he is innocent, and at the same time he believes that God is good, and it's difficult to put those things together. At the end of the story, then, God responds. God steps in. He doesn't give a comprehensive answer to Job and nor to us, the reader, but he steps in and challenges the men who came with the easy answers, with the simple explanations of who God was and of how the universe works. Their simple explanations, the algorithms that they had committed to memory, weren't worth anything if they meant that Job had to suffer, that Job's pain was meaningless. You see, I don't look at a Rubik's Cube as chaotic or as a challenge to be solved. I see a Rubik's Cube as a thing of beauty. You know, a lot of times we see life within this interplay between chaos and order, between complexity and something that can be solved. But this is where we find ourselves in this ongoing struggle. That it's not always something that can be solved, and yet at some point we can't just sit in the chaos and the complexity of it either. I mentioned before that I would sometimes go to the store to buy the Rubik's Cube. The first one that I bought, when I brought it home, I held it and I looked at it for a little while, and then very quickly I mixed it up. I hadn't taken time to appreciate the beauty of that cube. And if you went to a store and instead of seeing a solved cube like this one, and you saw one that was mixed up like many of these, you would be less interested in buying it. Because at the store, when you're making the decision about bringing it home, you want to see the beauty of it. And this is where we find ourselves too. We want ourselves to be valued and appreciated. We want people to see our beauty, except a lot of times we don't believe even our own beauty is there. And so we have parts of us that are not put together, and parts of us that we sort of scramble together for the appearance of having our act together, of having the riddles of our life solved. A solution is in place. And we don't believe that other people will see that beauty unless we put together some fake beauty, some temporary beauty. But I don't believe that this is healthy for us to do. I don't think it's good for human relationships, and I don't think it's healthy for our relationship with God either. In the middle of the Bible, close to the story of Job, is a collection of poems, and we call them Psalms. One of them, Psalm 139, the writer talks about how God knows us intimately, that God knit us together in our mother's wombs. This is how closely God knows us. God sees the beauty in us. See, if you talk to one of these experts, the people who can solve a cube in under 10 seconds, and you ask them about their process, and if you watch the process, you'll see they're studying and analyzing the cube. Where are all of the pieces that they need? What are the steps they're going to need to do? Because as long as those pieces are there, they can see the solved cube already. They just have to figure out how to get from there to there. When you see the solved cube, you see the beauty and the order of it. And when you see the unsolved cube, the untrained person doesn't know how to get from there to there. The untrained person doesn't value the chaotic cube, because what they want is the solved cube. But I believe when God looks at us, he sees the solved cube. There's a story I want to connect to this from the Bible, and it's a story from the book of John where Jesus meets a woman. And this woman is, I'm just going to read the last little bit of it. But this woman is drawing water from the well where Jesus has found himself. He's been walking for a long way. He's sitting down to rest. The guys who are with him are going to get food. And so when she comes to draw her water, then he asks her for a drink. Now, she's surprised. She can tell by looking at him that he is Jewish, and she can tell that this is a situation where she, as a woman of another race, isn't really supposed to talk to this man of another race, different from hers. And so she kind of pushes back, double checking, is this really what you want based on who I am and based on who you are? Well, the conversation goes a little bit from there, and he tells her about her own story. This is a woman who has been used and abused by men in her own life, which probably makes her more suspicious of men from other tribes because of the men in her how the men in her tribe have treated her. And when Jesus is able to see this and tell her aspects of her own story, then she's impressed, of course. And she sees that this is a man who has spiritual understanding. To use the Rubiks cube analogy, this is a man who has the algorithms figured out. So then she asks him an algorithm question. And then she says, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet." Right? So this is a man who has the answers. "Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, the one close to the well. But you and your people say that it is necessary to worship in Jerusalem." So now she's asking a question, and very much an algorithm question. What is the right way to worship? What is the right place to worship? You see, she understands that people who understand the Spirit should operate through patterns and algorithms. But Jesus doesn't play this game. He says, "Believe me, woman, the time is coming when you and your people will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem." Except that worship will happen in spirit and in truth. The conversation continues. Jesus can see that this woman is looking for, is needing something. And then after this conversation happens, she goes back to her own people. She's excited. They all know her story. They all know where she fits in the community. And despite all of that, she goes back to the community. It says here, many Samaritans in that city believed in Jesus because of the woman's word when she testified, "He told me everything I've ever done." All of the things that she had done, the good and the bad. Everybody knew the bad things that she had done and that had been done to her. And yet, Jesus, knowing this, was a testament to his credibility, to the person that he was and what he offered to her. She, too, was fearfully and wonderfully made, just like the rest of us, just like the psalmist says in Psalm 139. Jesus knows us intimately. When he sees when he sees us, he sees the cube as solved. He sees the cube as beautiful. So this is what I want us to experience, what I want us to learn. That God doesn't see us as someone who is chaotic, mixed up, messed up. God sees us as a person of beauty. And when we understand that, when we can work within that, then our relationship with God gets better. You see, I mentioned before, we feel like we need to put up artificial appearances of who we are to other people so that they will like us. Well, that isn't healthy for human relationships. I believe it isn't healthy for our spiritual relationship either. This isn't what God wants us to do, to have a fake appearance. God sees the real us. And when we understand that God sees the beauty in us, then we are equipped to see the beauty in other people. And when we do that, then we are more able to share our love and share God's love in the world and make this world a better place. Thank you.